in being here, I applaud each and every one of you for that because, yeah, you deserve that round of applause. Go you. We're excited to see so many of you here today and kind of excited to be here, even if we're being quite honest. Collaboration is something obviously we all feel very strongly about. But I think more importantly, I already know a lot of you. I know you feel pretty strongly about it too. And so as we're going through this, we're fully aware we are not the only experts or even the experts on this. All of you are equally well versed and have plenty to add to this conversation. And so we will be sure to include you, but also if you have something you want to add, make sure that you let us know to add it, because part of collaboration is hearing all of the voices that are here and listening to one another and learning together. And so that really should be a part of this session. If you don't want to do that, because you're like, you just said that I came from lunch and I'm exhausted, and it's true. Touche, totally fair. We're not going to judge you if you have your laptop out, phone out, getting a few emails in. That's another part of collaboration. Knowing when your collaborators need to take a step back. So we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming. We're just going to talk a little bit about modern recruitment, how things have maybe shifted a little, and how that shift is kind of pushing us more and more towards collaborating with one another, even as some of our institutions might be a little hesitant about certain pieces of that. I'm very lucky to be up here with some of my favorite collaborators today, people who often make me laugh and who I usually talk to when I want to cry. And I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Longtin. I'm at Michigan State University. Ashwin?
I'm Ashwin Duggi, York University. I'll get there, I promise.
How many years now?
4.
That's fine. Close. Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Strong, and I'm at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign.
All right, so who has the clicker? I have the clicker. Yeah, we're with it today, guys. So briefly, we're going to go over a few things today. Here's the thing. We're a chatty bunch, and so are you. And so a lot of this is, again, meant to be looser, more conversational, and we depend on you adding to this. We'll talk a little bit about some of the benefits so that any of you people who are holding out and not convinced that collaboration is the way to go, maybe come to our side early in the session. And then we'll talk some about the ways that we've collaborated. I'm excited to hear about some of the things all of you have done to collaborate over the past few years as well. A little bit about things like gaining institutional buy-in. It's not always easy. Tips for collaborating and what to look for. And of course, finding those great collaborators that can change your life, recruitment, university, and everything else that goes along with it. Let's jump in, my friends, and we're starting with the benefits because we're convincing you, right? And we're going to start talking not to our university colleagues. I think I've got a lot of you on already, but it's also about the schools, right? And a lot of our work isn't as much about us as it is about the institutions and students that we serve. I love having you sit here and nod. That's great. You can always sit there in front of me. And so we're thinking about our audience, right? And in a lot of ways, the reason we collaborate is to benefit the counselors and the students that we work with. These are people who need our support to have a group of people come up and say, hey, you know those certificates that you keep sending me to verify and give to universities? They don't want them. And if we are there as a unified voice, it has more power. And so there's power in numbers and in groups. And that power can support our students and counselors as we're helping them help students get to our campuses. An additional benefit is, I don't know, how many of you have done visits already in the past couple weeks to schools? How many schools did they say were coming to their campus in the next month? Did anybody ask? I heard 70, 80 schools all coming to visit at the exact same time. That's a lot for anyone to coordinate, much less as you are trying to get your students to complete those essays. Please, they've been trying for months. as you're trying to get support from your admin to send transcripts and get everything together for that, as you are trying to help last year's batch of students still get to campus. And so by collaborating and working as units, we can often help our counselor friends and colleagues condense and get things done in one place. It's also beneficial for them because they are not outreaching to 12 different people. They might be outreaching to one or two instead. And so it really kind of helps them tighten things up a little bit more. Ashwin, you want to talk more about the university side?
Sure. So for universities, it helps as well. It helps you achieve new markets, reach out to new places. So the schools that they're aware of, I probably am not aware of. So that helps us in reaching out to different regions, different areas, demographics as well. The workload is shared. So instead of all three of us coordinating with the schools, one of us is doing it on behalf of everyone, and the schools like that too, because it reduces their workload as well. And again, it helps because the contacts are different. Their school relationship with some schools is better than mine, and vice versa. So we again gain a lot from that. And of course, I gain knowledge about their schools. So it helps me divert some students who come to me, talk to me, to their school, saying that, I don't offer aeronautical engineering. Why don't you go to the other university? We have that all the time in fairs where you have 200 programs, and then most of the students that come to you are programs that you don't offer. So you divert them to the other institution. So then they can divert students back to you. So it's a win-win for every institution that is collaborating together. Yes?
Yeah, I really value being able to learn from my peers as well. So usually if I hear something's going on in Canada, it helps me understand, well, I'm probably going to get more inquiries about something similar to this as well in the US. Similarly, it just gives you an idea of trends happening and within that space. And so I can't say enough about collaboration, especially as a one-person office, which is very shocking for the size of my institution, of being able to manage and do a lot of these things together. One of the other big pieces that we've started to do a lot more with is professional development. I know that a lot of individuals crave professional development. They want that next step, and not always is that available in your office in the ways that you're hoping to do so. And so we have found ways to make sure that collaboration also helps gain really helpful skill sets and help develop you further than just what you have available in your office. And so you're able to then go and learn new markets pretty easily within the comfort of knowing that you have institutional context and not necessarily having to find them all and researching that. You're able to learn how to schedule and plan. And in our case, we use a lot of logistics coordinators, so making sure you're managing expectations and guidance on where you're needing to be going and things within that space. The other piece that really has been helpful is you start to develop colleagues and networks outside of just your own community. And so you're able to challenge your knowledge base beyond just your institution, which I think we're all getting to the point we understand students have a lot of questions and they're applying all over. And there's nothing more beneficial than to be able to say, you know what, I actually don't have an interior design program, but I know my colleague at Michigan State does, and I'm going to help you explain what that looks like for them so you can go talk to them about that program. And so being able to learn more about the industry, about higher ed, how to work within spaces and small teams, especially if you're in a one-person office. And sometimes we really do get in that insular space of this is my work, this is what I'm doing, trying to get this done. But how do you work within groups and peers in that space as well? So we cannot say enough good things about collaboration, but hopefully throughout this, you'll see some ways that you might be able to and things like that. Before we jump to the next slide, for any collaborators out there, what do you find as benefits of collaboration? Does anyone have anything we didn't highlight that you're like, wait, let's talk about this too? I should also mention another great way of collaboration is shared cost. A lot of it, we are splitting the cost of logistics and drivers. We're splitting the cost of, just everyday things that you would have to cover as one institution. So we're able to get a lot more done in a time period, and you have people for morale. I don't know if you've all traveled for a while or if this is your first stop. Travel's not the same. Let's just highlight that. There has been a lot of bumps in the road. There's a lot of things that you need, and having that team to be able to support you through it. Maybe one of you's not feeling well. We jump in and we do the presentation, and it's still like you're there. And so having that team on the road is also a huge piece of it. But anything else? Yeah.
And I think that is a very good point, because a lot of the things that we've pulled in over the last few years, let's be honest, we were desperate. We were just throwing things at the wall, hoping something would stick. And you're like, at least I have these students to talk to them. I can't get there, but it's something. And so much of it has actually gone well. Like, that's not a bad thing. It's actually a great thing, right? We put in the work and it's paid off. But now it's kind of shifted the way we do our work, right? And that's the benefit, right? It was already shifting in that direction pre-pandemic. I know, looking around the room, I see several people that I collaborated with pre-pandemic even. But it was shifting slowly. And then we didn't have a choice. We were thrust into it together as a big happy family. And it turns out students love it. They don't want to just hear from me. They want to hear from all of us together. And they want not for me to be selling my institution. They just want to know how to apply in general. They want to know that they have options, that they have support, quite honestly. And so it's changed a lot. It's not about you anymore. It's about who you can bring to the table to support them as a unit. And absolutely, alumni are a key piece of that. We don't hit on that as much, but they're huge. And so much of this stuff has kind of come through those types of programs that were really just a Hail Mary, throwing it out there. And they've shifted what we do now and what the expectations are of the population that we serve. And so as we're coming back on the road, we can't do what we used to do. Because while, yes, the students are still excited to see us and grab our paper and realize that, oh my gosh, you have legs, they also have high expectations of us because we've shown them what we're capable of. Now, are we exhausted? Yes. Do we really have the bandwidth to keep doing it at that same level? I think that's a great conversation to have as a piece of that. But if you are doing it with other people, it gives you a little more bandwidth to do a few more of those things. Let's talk about some of the ways, because I think we've already entered into this beautifully. Thank you. And it's varied. So many of us have so many ways that we've been collaborating over the past few years. There's the easy ones, right? Like, we've been traveling in groups for a while now. And some of us are groups of different universities from the same region, different universities with interest. We'll talk about some of that stuff in a bit. But that piece has been in place. But it's the other stuff that's really grown. So, for example, it's things like working with another university that maybe you've never even met before to talk about financing your education. Everyone's favorite topic, I know. And to share it from different perspectives. And it changes the skill set that we need to go into our jobs. And so, again, another conversation, maybe we need to revamp interviewing. But it adds to the overall conversation when we're at these schools and engaging with these students and how we act and function. And I think it can go back on the counselors as well. We don't have as many counselors here, but it is equally as important that high school counselors tell us what they need and want from us too, right? So when we're doing some of these group visits, if a school's reaching out and saying, listen, I'm getting a lot of questions about this, we've learned to respond to that over the last few years. And while post-pandemic, a little less time to do that, fortunately, we're a nimble group, very capable, and we've adjusted pretty well to that type of environment in terms of collaborating for presentations and groups and things like that.
So some of the ways schools help us in collaboration is by having school fairs, which we all love because it's so easy. You get an invitation, you fill a form, you arrive there, you meet the students, they meet you, you give the information, you leave. You live too, because after those fairs, you are usually quite tired. Then, of course, there is our visits, which we collaborate together to visit a school. I have visited schools with Canadian institutions. I visited schools with UK institutions, which is a lot of fun too. The latest thing, of course, is WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups. There are a lot of those, and we are part of a lot of them. Helps a lot, especially for guidance counselors. They spread the word. We're thinking about having a fair on a particular date. How many of you are interested in coming? They're sending out feedback forms. They're sending out interest RSVP forms now. Helps a lot, I think. Helps them a lot. It helps us as well in a way. So that's some ways the schools are collaborating as well. So it helps a lot. Schools are also inviting neighborhood schools, which helps us see a lot more students in one particular school at one location.
So I think what we've learned from this is that they're already doing thorough research before we're coming into a school. In most cases, if the school counselor has shared that the schools are coming, 9 times out of 10, a student is asking me more questions than I even know the answers to, that I am saying I need to Google as well. And I don't have the time and space to do as much of that. And they don't really need the general profile anymore, as Amber started mentioning. So we've done a lot more of what do you all want doing the high school profile. How do you develop it? That's been a hot topic. How do you build your best version of yourself? What are you looking for? Application workshops and just getting to the basics of how do you even fill out sections of the application so it can take a workload off of those counselors. And so I've pushed back saying more of, I'm not here necessarily to go and talk only about the University of Illinois. I'm more of a United States extension of how can I represent as many schools as possible to help them as counseling or in whatever area they still need help within. And so there's a lot of other ways that we're seeing collaboration happen outside of this. Has anyone hired a marketing firm or someone to help with digital marketing or communications because of the pandemic, as a result of the pandemic? Any of that? Yes, no, some of them? Are you trying to do more robust communication as part of this? So that's another way of collaboration is, can you do more on the ground ahead of time, maybe through external marketing firms? Or how can you increase your drip campaigns and your marketing communication as students are going to your websites and filling these things out? Can you provide a lot of this information ahead of time so that you are spending more time answering the questions they're already coming with or helping address a big topic that they may have? Some other places and ways to collaborate are going to be maybe a little closer to home that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So how do you find these groups? How do you start to get a part of these organizations? So in the United States, we'll look there first. There's a lot of study state consortium that are working through part of the U.S. Commercial Services. So I'm currently serving as chair of the Study Illinois. I have a former chair here, which I'm so excited to see as well. And so we have done stuff to try to bring more awareness to the state. Can we do any collaboration efforts and seeing if you can find groups and just keeping Excel docs of who's traveling and when, and do you need small groups to travel with is a huge piece of it. I know that there are like Education USA centers that are always willing to connect you with other partners. We've reached out and they said, hey, we have another school coming. Can they tag along with your event? And finding networking there. I think the big thing to take away from this is be open to expand your network of who it could be. It doesn't have to be the schools you've always traveled with. It doesn't have to be the exact same type of institution. We're finding that school counselors are actually very appreciative the more diverse the group is because you're able to provide perspective from so many different angles. And so it does become very easy if you can start to look into some of these networks of how do you start to find collaboration and partners through this. I know when the pandemic first took off and a lot of this Facebook groups, we had a lot of people saying, hey, I'm looking for small group partners. I think we need to bring that back now that we're back in person. Now that people are going back and doing things offline, how can we continue to expand these things and not just offer them virtually, which how many of y'all are tired of virtual recruitment at this point? Yeah, double hands for everyone. I know it's there. It's important, and I know it's still a part of this, and I think that that's also how you take some of this burden off is if you can have someone in your small groups or you have multiple small groups and have them help plan some of these things, it really does start to really be an easier way to move into some of these pieces. We want to head to the next slide. So we wanted to make sure we highlighted this. Has anyone had resistance, or does anyone ever ask on your leadership teams, who are you traveling with? Or ask why you're traveling with? Has anyone had a roadblock when determining who you should be with or not? I see a lot of head nods, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. How many?
Names.
Yeah, no, we don't. How many of those head nods for those are the leadership team members ever actually traveled internationally on behalf of your institution that are making the decisions on who you should travel with? Some of you, 0. Oftentimes they don't get it, right? Like it's not necessarily they see what's on the ground. They don't hear from the counselors in the same way we do. And so we wanted to make sure we provided some things here for you to take away in terms of how do you even get that institutional buy-in. So the first one that helped me in many ways, the ability to customize the content and visit types. I control where I'm going, I work with the group to get buy-in to make sure we all are on the same page. It's just about what do we want to present and what does that look like coming back. So if you can present an argument of why is this an important piece to your recruitment and how does this fit in, I think that's the big one. You get to really control and tailor that presentation and where you're going and spending money. You're also developing and building relationships. I have had way more connection with counselors because I'm able to talk to them ahead of time before visits. I know them very well. I'm very familiar with the Bangalore counselors. For some reason, every trip to India, I have always scheduled in Bangalore. So I feel like I know it better than most cities in the US at this point. And so I have this relationship. So if I have an issue, I'm able to go back really quickly and call that counselor up right away and say, hey, what's happening here? And we have direct lines of communication. And that's been super helpful for me to help talk to my director about, hey, this is where we want to be, why we want to be here. Look at these relationships I've walked away with, as well as peer institutions. I'm able to ask Ashwin what's happening there on the ground so I can provide real content from other universities. Where the Big Ten has a very well-known, collaboration of sharing data and information, and I value that so much, where we're able to just say, hey, are you seeing a drop in enrollment from this country and what's happening there? Are you having troubles here? But having that small group, it becomes this circle of enrollment managers that you're able to then ask information pretty quickly because you're probably on WhatsApp and WeChat and all of these things to get direct communication back. And so that was another way that showed them that this is a really valuable investment of our time. I also stopped asking as much about other professional development things and nagging in that area because I was gaining a lot of these skill sets that I was hoping to develop more by being a part of these collaboration efforts that we are doing. It also provided some diverse counseling opportunities and how you're able to go about this job and look at it from a different lens. And how many of your domestic colleagues reached out to you really quickly when the pandemic hit and said, wait, how do you do this? Yeah, a couple of you. No one knew how to do armchair recruitment. No one knew the virtual ways and the needs and demands of providing a lot of detailed information that we're all providing. And so this was really a great way for me to help train our counseling team on how to do some of these pieces because I've had skill sets using these. You're also gaining collaborative initiatives. Everyone in job search is moving forward. They want you to be able to collaborate, work well with others and in teams. And these are practical things that you can take away from it. I've also been able to use my budget in very innovative ways. I'll be very transparent. When I started at Illinois, my travel budget was $30,000. It was not far. Didn't take me for much. But I got 4 trips out of it that year because I was able to share costs for logistics and do all of these things. And it made it go a lot further than if I were to go and try to do all of this on my own and navigate it and pay for the hotel car because I didn't feel safe with, whatever areas I had. And so it does help you really maximize budget in creative ways. We as a consortium have used shared yield events. And so covering the cost of ballroom spaces and helping kind of navigate that with 9 to 10 schools versus paying for it on your own can be also a very effective way of doing this. It also, you get feedback from your counselors really quickly. Once they know you're there, once you have those personal relationships, they're calling you, they're asking, they're telling you what's happening with the national board curriculum before it's even in the news, before you get it 2 weeks later. And so if you can continue these channels of information, suddenly it becomes a little less of, well, what's that school's ranking you're traveling with? Or that's not the same prestige that we need to be a part of. They realize it doesn't matter. If you can get the point across that there are hundreds of students, thousands that you're going to be meeting on a trip, not every student is applying to every school. It may feel like that, but it's not. And you're not in direct competition as if you think you might be on the surface. A student that wants to come to my institution is not also looking at another school in the same way and interest level because they are looking for niche things. And so if you start to look at it that way, if you're confident in what you understand of your brand, it really shouldn't be too big of an issue to bring a lot of this attention to it. And so I think we've covered a lot of it, but are there any other ways that you have found institutional buy-in as you're starting to creatively collaborate? Yes, very hard.
How'd it go?
Hold it close. Okay, got it. So I'm Petra. I represent Franklin University, Switzerland. Obviously, tiny country. So it's always really nice to see, study in Holland, UK. And I'm like, I'm so jealous. I want that too. But, you have a lot of these kind of conversations. And mind you, it also depends on who's in that space, because these are the same people that will look at me like, so did you know that there's an American school of insert city here? And I'm like, wow, no, never even thought about that. Thank you so much for clarifying. But I feel like a lot of the kind of question becomes exactly, they're looking at lists of competitors and it's like, well, why are you with those people? Like they are the ones that we're in competition with. And I think so many of the conversations really do go back to all of these things that listen, a student who chooses us is going to choose us for very distinct reasons as opposed to another university, and just understand that regardless of whether we come as a team or not, they still have access to all this information. So they can still be looking at all of those schools. They might not tell you who they're all looking at. So I'm like, it doesn't just necessarily mean just because you're doing kind of the small group travel that you're able to do that. I mean, I tried because exactly I do chair the American Universities Abroad Association. So I am trying to exactly also just to give them platforms like this, that you can come to a conference, you can collaborate on a presentation with universities, right? The same way, if I can't get through to a counselor, I don't have an updated email, I have people to reach out to say, hey, listen, have you spoken to them? Could we get a message out? So I feel like all the things that you guys are saying is definitely there. It just, really depends on who you're speaking to. Sometimes they're more receptive to that information. Other times it's a bit more of a struggle, but keep fighting the good fight.
And armor up for it, because sometimes it's a long fight. Anyone else have experiences they would want to share on how they maybe turned something that maybe they weren't interested in that collaboration at a higher level, or you faced some resistance and convinced people that it was the right move for you as at the time? Or a failure that you want support and commiseration with? Well, I love that you all have such open supervisors. That's great. Okay, so the next thing is like, who do you travel with, right? And I think this is actually an area where we as a profession need to be better, actually. Because a lot of times we are comfortable. And I will raise my hand as one of these people right here. I'm standing up here with two people I've collaborated many times with, right? It was easy for me to send a WhatsApp message and say, hey, Ashwin, let's talk about this. But realistically, I could have reached out to any of you. And so to some extent, especially moving into this new kind of collaboration-centric atmosphere, we need to all open ourselves up as we're going out and getting started with this. Because by sticking with the people that we know, we're limiting ourselves, our students, and what we are capable of accomplishing. Being comfortable is great. And do you know what? For this year especially, I'm going to give it to everyone here. Do the comfortable thing. It's rough out here. But in reality, we need to challenge ourselves by going beyond that. It was easy for me to travel with the Big Ten. We knew each other. Hi, guys. I still like you all. We still travel together some, and we still collaborate. But I remember putting together that group of universities from the US and Canada for group travel, which was less traditional. And I also remember the response from the high school counselors who were like, this is great. We've never had someone come in and compare and contrast the two education systems. This is awesome. Now we can have students that thought they were just interested in the US come and learn more about Canada, because maybe that is the better fit for them. Or putting together that group, which took so many emails, actually. Thanks for answering finally, Ashwin. For admission to medical schools in other countries. No one wants to talk about that for starters. None of us want to talk about that. But in the end, it is a session that though I did it years ago, I still have people coming up to me and saying, oh my God, I remember that session you did on medical school. I showed a student the recording the other day. It was really helpful. And so the more we push ourselves to go out of what's easy, we end up making some really magical things that really help us add to what we know. And so, yes, when we're establishing partnerships, absolutely consider things like geography. It does make sense. And in a lot of ways, it'll be easier for you to get support and buy-in on some of those things. Consider things like your athletic conference, people that you network with often, but also consider things like, how can I add to the conversation? Consider diversity in terms of perspective. There are a lot of amazing in-country recruiters here in India. How many of us that travel to India work with in-country people from other universities when we are here? Or are we much more inclined to just look within the other network of people that are coming to the country to recruit? You're missing out on a huge opportunity. There are some amazing people based here that you could be collaborating with. And it adds to everyone when we do that. And so establishing partnerships, I mean, look to the left, look to the right, pass your business card. These are your future collaborators. Everyone in this room is at least interested. And so, actually, impromptu, I'm going to pause and I want you to do just that. Because I see a few nods, I see a few people glazing over a little bit, no judgment. I want you to exchange at least one business card with someone that you do not know.
Even I should go and get me.
Yeah, get your business cards out.
Are they trying to collaborate now? Are they trying to collaborate now?
Guys, I see lots of business cards exchanged. I see much more happy faces, which is great. You needed it. I knew it. I'm going to give you like 10 seconds. Wrap it up. Too much? I mean, we knew you were enthusiastic. Did we know how enthusiastic? We're learning, which is great. This is the best. Okay, so I see many of you exchanged. Did we exchange cards? We gonna hang out later? Yeah, exchange ideas? Maybe do a webinar or two? A lot of collaboration is just asking and finding that energy and courage in some ways to turn around to the person next to you at a table at a conference and say, hey, what are you doing? Would you be interested in jumping in on this with me? It's just that simple. Now, in a virtual world, less simple. Sorry, virtual people, that it was harder to exchange business cards than it was for the people here. But we can do these same things virtually. There are still ways for us to have moments like this when we are remote, when we're attending a conference online, or at other networking events. I don't know how many of us are CIS schools. I've been going to all of their networking things during the US time slot. So to be fair, US time slot. The UK and Europe is in bed by then. They don't care anymore. There's usually only like 20 of us. How sad is it to miss out on an opportunity to find that new collaborator? And usually, I get it. It's because you're exhausted, because you have 20 meetings, and because no one is prioritizing your professional development and that opportunity to build those connections. And you need them. Like, you need them mentally, emotionally, you need them professionally. But we have to get better about prioritizing that portion of things, because in the end, those come back and pay off in the opportunity to do more, better things for our institutions and for our students, most importantly. Now, one other piece to establishing partnerships, it is really not just about the institutions that you're collaborating with. To be very transparent, it is also about the people. And so it's as much about finding people that you don't think you would drive you crazy if you hang out with them for 2 weeks, as it is about finding people at an institution that's a good fit for yours. People that you trust will have your back if someone else in the room is asking about a program and direct them to you, because you know they're not in it for them, they're in it for the counseling piece. And that's probably the hardest part about finding collaborators, because you can't get that just from exchanging business cards today. We're all awesome today. Would we be awesome sitting in a car together for 4 hours in traffic? It takes a couple meetings to get there, right? And so it's an investment in finding these partners and partnerships, but it's an investment that I promise you is well worth making, especially if you can laugh through the 5 hours in the car with some really great people. Let's move on.
This is the last slide. Oh, yeah. So some of the things to remember, tips to collaborate. Persistent. Amber, very persistent. The last 2 times she wanted to collaborate with me, I was not interested. She was very persistent. She routed her request through another colleague who reached out to me saying, why are you being so difficult? And we did a presentation, and that's her persistence. Also her patience, because she has to put up with me and tell me what to do, when to do, and how to do, and where to be. So she has a lot of patience and just came along for the ride with us too. I, on the other hand, am a very good collaborator because I did not contribute much to this. So everything they asked me to say, I have to say because I didn't contribute too much. So in a way, I am a good collaborator as well. So that's how these things work. Don't be afraid to try new things. schools want us to do different things. Schools are always happy with something new because they want their students to pay attention. So don't be afraid to try new things, pilot new things, because sometimes your pilot can actually be a huge success. Always, it's intimidating to try something new, but if you don't try it, you will never know. But always there will be some level of ROI regardless of what you try that is new. But it might not be exactly what you intended for, but it might have a different benefit altogether. We collaborated many years ago in a school, which everybody thought was a waste of time. 4 years later, a student actually joined the school because she heard from about our school from the year 12 student that we presented to. But we got the ROI 4 years later. Who knew that would happen, right? So sometimes those things happen as well. Counselors are usually a very great resource. You can ask them what is it that they are expecting. More and more counselors are not expecting us to come and talk about the school so much, but they want us to do something like a workshop. Some of them are being conducted by the recruiters as well. It's not always necessary that you need to have a professor or a teacher to do that. Students also have a lot of things that they want to say. So ask feedback when you're visiting schools, when you're speaking to students about what they would like to know. I think they've all heard enough about good SOP, maybe something else. That's what that's the feedback I got from schools. Also understanding your profile, your school profile. Where are you going with your profile? You could be going to all the wrong schools, or which you have been thinking that is a good school for you. For us, when I joined York University, a classic example is we used to go to schools where we used to get applications from, but no conversion. We started to realize that soon enough that we need to move our school pool where we are going to. So that is something very important as well. And collaboration helps a lot because I might not have access to a few schools, but my collaborators do. And then you end up going to those schools. I cannot stress enough how easy it is to get access to if you at least know one person in the group who knows somebody in the school. Of course, don't limit yourself, try new things. We recently we tried a whole appreciation dinner for counselors. I, as a university, would never be able to afford it on my own. But then when we pooled resources with 7 other institutions, it was a cakewalk. Both for the expenses and the workload, right? Like we divided who was handling which part of it. Somebody took care of the entertainment, somebody took care of the venue, some of us took care of the invite. So we divided the work equally, and it was a huge success. And again, we're all competitors, so to speak, with one another, but then we all work with the same set of schools, hence benefits all of us. And the counselors had a great time. It was a win-win for all of us. Be a collaborator is the last one. I already spoke about that, but yay, be a good collaborator. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the session.
Yeah, I was just going to say one other thing. Ashwin, I think you're selling yourself short. When we talk about be a good collaborator, it's just being aware of that space you're working within. Make sure that you're contributing as well and not just showing up to the visits and being there. Contribute ideas. Don't be afraid to challenge each other's space. I think that was one of my favorite parts of starting to collaborate was that it helped me become more aware of how I was even presenting myself and how I was working within groups and how can I be better within that space of hearing others, but also figuring out innovative ways to create within that space. And so don't limit yourself in all of this. You really don't know what's possible if you don't start asking these questions and starting to work with them. We by no means are experts in this area. We've done a lot of crash and burn things. We've gone to schools where we didn't have anyone engage in an activity, or we communicated with each other and had schedules incorrect, and things happen. But if you are okay with continuing to try, continuing to look at new innovative ways, or how do you tweak presentations you did before and continue to grow on that area of interest? How can we be hybrid now and continue to maybe do both areas of it and look in how does that make it easier for us within each group? So I don't know if you have anything else to add for tips.
I think it's important to look beyond just the person and into the skill set as well. So let's use this group as an example. Ashwin's thrown himself under the bus. I don't know if I'd go there. Very different skill sets here, right? So the initial session idea, proposal, whip that together in 20 minutes, gold. Can't believe it sounds that good, guys. I was running on coffee fumes that day, and it was at the last minute. Please don't tell the people that pick sessions that. I had the idea. I had the network of people. But if you were to talk to us on the 14th, we had the session description somewhere. We didn't have the session. We had the idea. We didn't have the pieces. I was busy that week. Did not have time, meetings. Jess was on it. She put stuff together. She gave us an outline. Ashwin has been freaking out in the background, telling us that we need to get moving for weeks now. And so while he is undervaluing his contribution, I can promise each and every one of you today that we would probably have very little here, and it would be a much more impromptu session if he hadn't been there reminding us, hey, can we do that, please? Because we're much more last-minute people.
Okay, I take my word back. I'm a very good collaborator. I was completely in on this presentation. This is all me.
Totally. See? And that's another important part of having collaborators. Sometimes we're down on ourselves. We've done a lot more than we thought we did. And we need our collaborators to remind us that actually we're pretty awesome. And so be that person for the others that you collaborate with as well, because then it'll come back to you fivefold. I promise. And it's an important part of being a good collaborator with others. Critical, in fact. Other things to consider, it's not just about institution personality. I would also say consider skill sets beyond that as well. So for example, I'm not a designer. My PowerPoints are pretty basic, but I know that Chris at Orange Coast, mwah, chef's kiss. Those slides look professional. He also never says no to collaborating, which he will freely admit. Don't tell him that I told all of you that. I don't see him here right now, so. But there are different skill sets that different people can bring to the table. And a lot of times, if we are in our circles, we forget about those other pieces, about the ride that you were able to provide us because Ashwin has a car. There are just lots of different types of skill sets out there that we need to consider when we're putting these groups together. Now, is the car the main thing that you consider? Sorry, no. But it's a big piece of it. And I think by having the different people with different ideas, we come up with better things later from that. And so instead of moving to questions, what time is it? How much time am I giving them?
11 minutes.
Oh, never mind. After this, and after we take questions, I am going to say there's a 30-minute networking break. You should probably hang out here and network more with the schools here, because these are all people who want to work with you, and I saw some great conversations happening. I want you to brainstorm. Think about the things that you could do as a unit that you can't do with what you have right now. I know it's the end of the conference. I know you're exhausted, and I know that you're like, that's nice, Amber. I'm leaving. That's fair too. But we don't get these opportunities often to be together in a room with people who want what we want. And so we should use it to the most that we possibly can, even if that means you're doing a couple emails at the airport, or you're running into someone at the airport and out talking about them a little more about that great idea you had in today's session. So since it is only 10 minutes, and since we do want to respect everyone's time, we'll save an activity for later and take any questions that anyone has or things that you want to share about your own experiences. Because collaborations can go both ways. We definitely focused on the rosy and the good. They're not all good. It's kind of like that group project in school sometimes where you're doing the PowerPoint and all of the work, and then someone comes in 15 minutes late and you get to share the stage. There are definitely bad collaborators out there. We know that too.
That you brought up making sure that you have buy-in. But I've done things with Study Illinois where someone I was presenting with an hour beforehand found out that they weren't supposed to be doing it, but it had already been advertised and everything else. So I ended up presenting their slides for them after creating it for them. And so it ended up actually, it was a learning curve for me, but it was also, it showed a lot to the person that we were presenting to in the community, because they saw you stepping in, and it actually strengthened the bond that I had with the other person I did it with. But making sure that not only do you know your institution has the buy-in, but everyone involved. It's like, oh, hey, how did the conversations on your campus go? I've asked that question since then, just to make sure for sure they thought to ask that, because there are things that you think about troubleshooting that sometimes you take for granted that the people that you've talked to already have. Don't do that. I won't again.
Thank you. I think we've talked a lot about external collaboration, but something I like to stress upon is internal collaboration as well. Because in order to be a good collaborator externally, you do need to pass on that information internally as well and make sure that you're actually providing solutions to your collaborators. So when you visit a school or you're visiting an agent, or if they have some feedback from the students as well, so if you pass it back to the team and do stuff accordingly, make our plans accordingly, I think that's really, really important. Also, collaboration between marketing, admissions, recruitment, internal collaboration is a big thing as well. Yeah.
That is like a 2-hour session at least, and probably more of a training class for a lot of our offices to go through.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say there's room for improvement for everyone.
I do want to stress the internal collaboration if you can. I think that's something I worked a lot on during the pandemic, was trying to connect the dots of my campus of who's doing what and how are you doing this. And so if you're able to start with even just your study abroad offices, where are they traveling? Can you send brochures or pennants with students to the schools they're going to? International advancement. They actually took me up on my offer. She's in Hyderabad right now on a separate trip, meeting with alumni and then connecting me with them because she just needed someone to say, oh, I didn't know you're going to India. I've never been. I just want someone from the university with me in the country. So every city I've been in, she's been, we don't actually do anything together. So that's an easy ask. They're spending money. They're doing things already. So if you have the ability to ask some of these questions internally, do it. I've had no one say no to me yet, and I'm finding out a lot of inner workings on my campus that I wouldn't have. And I know some pretty cool people now that I wouldn't have before. So I think that's a great point of just internal collaboration can go a long way as well. Any other questions or thoughts?
Quick question about like the logistics of all this because I'm gonna get there. I thought about doing some visits together because it happens sometimes that you go visit a school and then unfortunately you don't have much students coming to your presentation. So I thought that could be a great idea to maximize the time of the school counselors and the students as well. But then when I started talking with some of the institutions I was considering collaborating with, they were thinking of traveling at a completely different time. And I thought, okay, I need to maybe ask them far in advance. So just curiosity, how do you get to organize that?
That's a trick sometimes.
And I think that depending on country groups, social media usage, a lot of times I have seen people just post on social media, I want to take a trip around this time, anyone else there? Now, the downside to that is you might get collaborators you never saw coming in good and bad ways. But a lot of times it is just kind of reaching out and having those conversations very early. Like the trip that I was just on, we started planning that in March so that we all knew we had this time locked out together. And so it gives you a little less ability to pivot in some ways because you've committed. You've committed to these institutions that you will do this thing with them and that you will do it as a collaborative group. And so that's why the buy-in is so important. And transparency, we had someone shift in fall and move in that group because of inter-office things that had nothing to do with anyone in the group. And so even once you've got that lockdown thing, things can happen. And so that's part of why it's important not only to plan in advance and find those collaborators, but to find people that you like so that you don't hate them at the end of it and that you can still kind of grow through it together, right? And so not a great tip, but starting early helps a lot. And I would also say if you're traveling around a certain time, I've had a lot of luck traveling in off seasons and just asking counselors if anyone else has scheduled visits for that time. And actually one of my best collaborators, I work with Julie from USC a lot. We were just in Pune at the same time. And a counselor was like, oh, you should do some visits together. And we did. And now we've done workshops together. And so it's grown from that. And so don't be afraid if you know that your time is limited and locked to a certain period to reach out to the counselors that you're interested in and say, hey, do you know anyone else traveling around this time? Because they want more than one person to come at a time. They're not interested in a bunch of solo visits usually. And a lot of times you'll meet people that then maybe are interested in kind of that time. It's a risk, but a risk that could have very high reward.
Thank you. What kind of data do you currently use to identify potential partners, particularly types of overlap data? Where do you get it, and what data do you not have that you wish you had to make decisions about collaboration?
I think that really depends on what the trip's purpose is. So most of my work right now is diversifying majors, diversifying countries. And so I'm looking for a group of schools that has diverse options to present. So we're not only focused on talking about computer science. I can't do it. It's too much. That's what I get asked. So I'm looking for schools that we can talk about other things that they have to support, that also provide diversity within the context of size of school, location. That's been really important for me when making decisions. But a lot of it comes down to, we don't have a lot of that data, right? It depends on kind of the consortium. Like, we default to the Big Ten a lot because we share a lot of information and we know a lot of these things. And so I think we need to be a little bit more transparent about some of these goals, profiles, what your intentions are, so that you can find partners that work well with you. I think we all think we have really super secret sauce going on, and we're all doing the same thing. And so if we're a little more transparent about it, it does become easier to find groups that work well within that space. And so we've just had a benefit of, that's why we default to it a lot. It's easy. We know who they are. We know what their goals are. And so if we're open more, I think that would help.
I would also say that some of the data I'm looking at to tell me this is successful is my applicant and enrollment numbers. And since I've started pushing in that collaborative direction in a specific market, it has like tripled. And so I know it's working because of that. I tend to believe that it is not about who my collaborator is much. It does not matter how much we overlap apps. It's about what we're able to produce together that is of value to the students. And if it is, then everybody wins. We had one more question there.
Just a quick comment, really, to echo some of the sentiments in terms of collaboration. At the beginning of the pandemic, as a result of the collaboration that happened pre-pandemic, in my former role, I was able to transition extremely well with my network and kind of colleagues saying, we can't visit somewhere, but can we hop on a Zoom and then start promoting Canada and options available there. Similarly, from the applicant journey, I think collaboration, internal collaboration, as your comment about alumni travel, I think an example in my journey, I collaborated with the alumni office and recently admitted students, and those conversations demonstrated in a tangible way to the students that this is what 10 years, 15 years, 30 years down the road, here's what your journey can look like from someone who has lived through that campus experience and gone that way. And then from a budget perspective as well, campus partners sharing resources can help you leverage your budget in more meaningful ways.
Awesome. In the interest of time, if you have other questions, we'll stick around for just a little bit. You can come up here and chat with us, but we're right at time. So thank you all so much for such wonderful contributions and collaboration. We hope this helps connect some dots for you all, but enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks, everyone.
Sorry there was no magic secret sauce, but as it happens, all of you are the secret sauce because you are all here today. And so I look forward next year to hearing about all the great things you all do together.
Thank you very much. See you soon.